welcome to Reading Marginalia, a place for creative conversations. Our guest today is featuring Sequoia Serrato, a lecturer in the English and Comparative Literature department at San Diego State University. She received her M.A. in English with a specialization in children's literature and recently completed an M.F.A. in writing for children and young adults at the UNR Low Residency M.F.A. program. Hello, Sequoia. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Hi, thank you so much for having me. I'm so excited.
Yes, I think this is going to be great. So we're going to go ahead and draw your cards before we get started for your creative journey. So I'm going to share my screen. Let's see. Can you see it okay?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, cool. So we're going to pull 7 cards for your creative journey. Maybe just kind of think about it for a second.
Okay. Mm-hmm.
I'm going to hover over a card and you tell me what order you would like it in.
Okay.
So 1 through 7, okay?
Okay. Am I boring if I just do 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7?
No.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay.
Okay.
But you tell me, okay?
Okay.
So this one.
1, 2, 3.
That's like
4, 5, 6, 7.
okay. Kind of horseshoe spread. The screen's a little small, but let's see what we got. So we have the Knight of Swords, the Nine of Pentacles, the Strength card, Hermit, Hierophant, 5 of Swords, and Queen of Swords. Interesting.
A lot of swords.
Do you know anything about tarot?
I do, yeah. I mean, I'm not like one of those people that can like pull up a card and be like, here's everything, but I definitely have a familiarity with it. And so this is really interesting. I actually end up pulling the 5 of Swords a lot too. It's like a card that reoccurs for me, and so it's really interesting to see that here.
Yeah, that is very interesting. So we'll see what we can deduct from it. But I also love like a lot of this is already making sense for like you as an educator with the Hierophant over here. The Hermit is interesting. I love the Knight of Pentacles. Okay, so let me see if I can adjust my screen so I can see you and the cards at the same time. Let's see. Oops, not that. Okay. Oh, great. Okay, you can still see everything. Okay, right? Okay, cool. So in the past, we have the Knight of Swords, which is interesting. It can talk about your learning. It's definitely in partnership with the Queen of Swords being more developed. It could also be your approach to a story. I don't know if you've written something very fast or very.
Yes.
Okay, you have.
Yes.
And are you working on a novel?
Yes.
Okay, so is something you've written very fast? How fast?
Well, it's funny. I mean, I'm interested to see where this journey goes here because it was something that I wrote in 2022, like very fast, just like, I got out like I can like 70,000 words and I was like, I'm pretty much done. And then everything since then, including my MFA journey, has been like almost like rewriting that story, you know what I mean? And so it's kind of like one of those things where it came very quickly, but it was just in such a maybe incomplete form that then I've been like wrestling with that form ever since. And so yeah, it started fast, but it's been slow since then.
So you just really wanted to do it, to accomplish.
Yeah, exactly.
You had a lot of thoughts about it too, like the ideas were already there.
Yeah.
The interesting thing is the obstacle is the Hermit. So you joined the MFA, the UNR Lake Tahoe program just to finish your story?
No, this was definitely a big stepping point for me to join an MFA program because I was really interested in like connecting with kind of like my creative writing, after being just like very academic and academia focused for a while. And so I had kind of gone through like an unsuccessful, but like not fully, like I did get some interest in like a querying that I was doing and like, so that was really like exciting. And so then I ended up kind of really quickly writing what became my thesis and what I'm working on right now. And then kind of when both of those projects, like when I really was starting to like stall and struggle with them, that was one thing where I was like, maybe I really do need to like visit this craft, and because creative writing had always been so kind of like a personal thing for me, like, teenager locked in a room, like, blah, 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 blah. And so I was like, maybe I really need to start like treating this as a craft. And so it was definitely one of the things that like kind of started opening that window in my mind of like an MFA program, and which turned out to be like, wonderful in just focusing on craft.
It's interesting because you are already a lecturer of English at San Diego State University. And so, how does that? And it's interesting because at The Hermit and the Obstacle can talk about education and knowledge already, but it
Yeah.
talks about it as an obstacle for your journey. So,
Yeah.
part of me wonders if there's a certain structure or thinking or I don't know. It just feels like
Like, how are the two at odds, maybe?
yeah, like
Yeah.
how would that interfere with your creative journey? And I'm trying to think of a way, but maybe you know,
I
is it
mean,
possible?
it's interesting. Like, they really like are such different spheres of the mind, which I kind of always knew, but then like getting into the MFA program was like one of the biggest things I've worked on, and I worked on with my first mentor, Tracy Chi, was reading like a writer instead of reading, in kind of the way that I normally would with like, analysis or kind of reading critically. And I kind of, thought like I could whatever kind of do both in a way, but it was so hard to switch that brain into reading as a writer, and also just like thinking, in that writer brain as opposed to always kind of in like the scholar brain. And the two are not always together. And so that was definitely something to overcome. And I think now, and I was actually just thinking about this today, and it's something my husband, because he's a professor, we always talk about is like you've only got so many words in a day that you can produce, and so when I'm like reading and writing and talking about reading and writing all the time for my job, it's wonderful and I love it. But then, for the whatever hour, half an hour I have in a day where I could sit down and write, it's just like sometimes it's just hard to do that because it's like I've already been reading and writing for so long today or for this week. And so I do find like as much as maybe they kind of generate with each other, because it's like I just get to live in like a world of literature and reading and writing, which is wonderful and a gift. Often the energy kind of siphons away from each other, and so it's not necessarily like after a day of teaching I'm feeling so juiced up to like sit down and write my novel. It's usually quite the opposite.
That totally makes sense. Okay, yeah, because you're kind of spent already.
Yeah, yeah, and it's not just like tired. It's just like I
Yeah.
can't get the brain to like push any more out at that point.
And something I wonder too, and this is me not knowing, can you
Yeah.
tell me a little bit about what the difference between reading like a like a writer is versus reading like in analysis mode for, as a
Yeah.
lecturer, as an intellectual.
Yeah, that's it's so interesting because and I think one of the big ways that I think about it and explain it is like when I'm reading critically, I always say like I don't really care what the author was doing or like wanted to do or thought they were doing. I'm really like engaging with the words on the page, in kind of just this like meaty textual way of like, okay, what, if I'm applying whatever, a feminist lens, queer lens, like how are we kind of, how are we unpacking this? What is going on here that the writer was probably unaware that was going on, that kind of stuff. But then when you're reading like as a writer and kind of reading for craft, it really does often come down to like understanding choices that the writer was making. Like why is this sentence this way? Why does tone work on this page, or like how does perspective shift work on this page? Like what choices are being made, and so kind of really shifting into looking at that stuff, and that really, I mean, we talk about things like diction, word, syntax. Like we talk about that stuff with close reading often as we are kind of doing like we look through for meaning through what is said, how it is said, but it's still different when you're looking at it at a craft lens and you're like, how could I do that myself, or like how can I apply that to like my own writing? And so it really does take like a different skill set, or maybe just a different kind of understanding of how you would apply that. And so that was really hard for me. Like I could start to notice things, but it still took a long time to think, okay, how does that actually like translate into like me knowing how to more successfully integrate like multiple perspectives or something like that into my own writing. But yeah, I mean, and I used to really be like, I don't ever care what the author was thinking or wanted to think, and now I'm, now I switch back and forth maybe a little bit more.
And it's interesting because Five of Swords, you talk about other perspectives in your story.
Yeah.
And there was something else that triggered it. Tricks and I feel like that's a good like tricks and skills card for your story. So what kind of tricks and things have you learned from your ability as reading as a writer that you're incorporating into your story this time around?
So great. And it's just like thinking about a piece holistically is something that I didn't do, kind of pre MFA. It was so like I think there's like a difference between like organic, innate skill and then like actual like refined, intentional skill, And so this piece originally, what was my thesis for my MFA program, the kind of work in progress that I have right now, it was, obviously kind of born out of that like organic writing skill that I had, and I just like grinded out those like 70K words. But going back and being intentional with it now is like, everything from like, it's a dual POV story. And so like literally thinking about like the sentence structure of one voice not appearing as a sentence structure in the other voice to try and like differentiate the voices, or like, instead of just kind of slapdashing in these different elements, like I've had to do like research. I was like interviewing a biologist, like all this kind of stuff that, again, before I was just kind of like, whatever, I'm having a good time. And so now just, thinking about this as this kind of big, holistic front to back piece, instead of just kind of like a fun exploratory, like I'll get there and I get there and I'm hitting my emotional beats, has been a huge challenge. And I mean, I've not like clicked it necessarily yet either. But that's been really kind of the arc of my work with it lately, has just been like both zooming out and then also just getting like way more granular, which is hard, but
Yeah.
Is something that I think, luckily get versed in more in the program that we were in.
Absolutely. And it makes me wonder because you mentioned granular and the Five of Swords also reminds me of cutting back. Is your
Yeah.
70,000 turning it into like a 50,000 word story? I mean, you are writing for YA. So
Yeah.
yeah. Have you, I'm not, the cards don't show me a complete finish yet.
It's not finished yet.
Okay. Yeah.
Yep.
But it shows editing, it shows cutting back. So where are you in the process?
Yeah, it's just like it's been just the like craziest like Frankenstein-esque story, where it's like I have pieces of it that have never changed since 2022, and then I've had pieces of it that have changed, 5 different times in like the last whatever 4 years. And then I have never ever written the ending of this story. Like I have just like I got to a certain point and then I've just been like endlessly kind of re-looping through in my different like edits of it and passes of it and whatnot. And I know how it ends, more or less, but I've just never actually like written that part. And so my challenge for myself this month was like, just write the ending of this story, like just write the ending. And so I've gotten more, and that's funny with the word count, and thinking of cutting back, I've gotten more and I've cut down more. And so I think I've been essentially hovering around like 73,000 words from like both the kind of contracting and then expanding that I've been doing. But I still have not finished it because I kind of keep pausing and being like, actually, I think I need to know like what happens now in like my new chapter 12 before I can like figure out what happens in the end. And so I'm letting myself right now like kind of make a chapter outline so I can do some kind of like rough filling in, but I'm still challenging myself to like not write anything but the ending. Like I'll do some filling in, I'll do some brainstorming, and then I just need to go back because like I feel like it needs to be ended, and have an ending, and then I can kind of keep doing the work with it. But I feel like I just keep getting away from ending the story. It's like I just need to finish it. It needs to be finished first. But yeah, so it's accurately reflected in the cards.
Well, and it's funny. It's like it's there. But
Yeah.
yeah, it's just a matter of you writing it.
Yeah.
The strength, well, the Nine of Pentacles is great. It shows you in your present position. One, you know how sometimes, I don't know if you notice this, but I will say that sometimes writers are very chasing a money or status or something like that. And I feel like with the Nine of Pentacles here, you already feel comfortable and confident in that for you, writing is not a money dream or a status or anything like that. For you, I think it's a little bit more of the artistic, of the creative, of the getting your mind on paper.
Yeah.
Can you say a little bit about that? Is that right?
It's really interesting to hear, yeah, because I think like I always when I was a really young teen writer, like I was whatever 12, 13, 14, like I was like I will be the next Stephanie Meyer. You know what I mean? Like I was one of those teen writers. And I was like I'm going to make $1 bajillion off of this da 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 da. And that really has shifted like as I've gotten older and kind of engaged with just like the real world and also just like my own work and everything. And so I've always said like I just really love teaching, and I want to continue teaching kind of regardless of wherever kind of writing went for me. But then I think there's always still, though, there is that allure of like writing as career and like what that means, what that looks like. Could it ever be like a solo enterprise in that way? And so I certainly do think about that. But I think I try to, especially going through my M.F.A. program, like it really not, and this, I talk to students like this way too, it's like, thinking of your work outside of, capitalism as much as you can, you know what I mean? And it's like, yeah, of course it's, wonderful when things like make us money and whatever like that. But, if, all the structures of our civilization were to crumble tomorrow, which sometimes it feels like they are. It's like work and art still, like your craft still has to have meaning, or like will still have meaning, And so that's something that I think about a lot too. Is like, that our work, writing, expression, art does have so much innate meaning and value outside of kind of the structures that we have for it now, as much as yeah, we're all like, we don't love a book deal, you know what I mean, or like this or that, and so yeah, I mean it's definitely, and I think when people, I do see people often, not necessarily in our program, but in other spaces, I'll see people who are like, I'm only coming into this with this sense of like I must be a bestseller, and I'm always like, what's outside of that though? You know what I mean? Because like that's just really not a reality for all of us. And so kind of like what does that look like outside of that? Or kind of like what's our engagement with our writing outside of that? And so yeah, I mean that's really interesting. That's something I definitely, but I'm definitely not like I'm not a Buddhist about this stuff. I'm not like I relinquish all material connection or anything like that. I'm definitely not. And so it's something I still think about. I'm like, YA market, let's see where we're going. But yeah, we had a great conversation in the last workshop that I was a part of in August with an author, an agent, and we were kind of talking about like writing like for the market, and how ultimately that's so. I mean, sometimes it can work, but usually it doesn't. And so again, it's like one of those things where you don't always want to think of your own work within like what's happening right now, and then kind of broaden out your engagement with it in those different ways. And yeah, I mean, it's. I'm just thinking. I'm thinking of my piece right now, and how at different moments I thought what I'm working on right now would be like a much easier kind of like marketable sell than like other things that I've written before, which were like really long, wandering, weird, like fantasy and stuff. And what I'm working on right now is like a little bit more of a kind of contemporary, straightforward thing. Except it's not. It's like it gets weirder and like less straightforward every time I work on it. And so again, that's been that kind of humbling, but maybe necessary work of like, if I start thinking about anything that I'm doing is like, ooh, is this like commercial? Is this like, is this like something that I could like really easily, like quickly, whatever, get an agent with or sell with or something like that? I end up just like getting farther away from the like work that I need to do with it. And then, I need to just like kind of come back to it and not think about it in those ways. And so that's definitely been kind of a big a big part of this piece, is like, ooh, is this like a fun, marketable little rom-com that like I could like, whip out and like immediately sell? No. It is not. And then, how does that then shift and kind of let me re-engage with it, necessarily re-engage with it without any of this idea of like, oh, this is going to be my like little quick, hot bestseller or something like that.
Totally. And oh, well, there's so much you said in that. Okay, so the most recent thought that I had is you're talking about your story right now, and I'm not sure that I know it, but there's the
Yeah.
strength card in the hidden, and I wonder if it's a story about overcoming.
Yes, it
Okay.
is.
And
Yeah.
is it health related at all? It might not be.
Kind of like mental health, I think I would say
Okay.
more trauma, kind of, childhood trauma overcoming. Yeah.
Okay. So is it, how do I say this? What does the story mean for you as a writer, and what do you hope it means for others as readers?
It's a great question. It's a beautiful question. Yeah. And yeah, I mean, in my workshops in the program, we talked a lot about like the heart of the story, and for me, the heart of the story has always been about, kind of maybe there's a shorter version of this, but the kind of longer version of it that maybe I'm about to say is like, when you've had a really difficult, traumatizing childhood and you are kind of almost an adult, you're in that like 17, 18, 19 range, and you've survived that childhood, but then that question of kind of like, now what, And so now how do you exist in the world? And how do you care about yourself? How do you care about others? I think that's kind of been a big part of this for me, because I feel like sometimes I feel like for me, that's a really interesting like period of one's life, and I think would really, maybe be interesting for readers as well, is that sense of like, how do you then how do you begin to turn outward into the adult world, and just into yourself in a lot of ways. And so that's for me, and for kind of the two dual like POV characters in that story. I think that's kind of the place that they're in, is like, okay, well, you technically survived, now what? And then that's, it's like, and ultimately what my takeaway, and what I'm trying to kind of put into that story is like, it's messy and hard and ugly in a lot of ways, but like the work that you do in that moment to start caring for yourself, start caring for others, start caring for like the world, and kind of re-engage in that world, is like, is really important, and ultimately very rewarding, and like that's how you kind of heal from those things.
I love that. And I love that you say caring for yourself and caring for others. So the
Yeah.
strength card, you'll notice that it's a human type form trying
Yeah.
to tame the lion. And sometimes that's a part of ourselves, right? Like
Yeah.
it's such a great card for care and for self-love, for empathy, for physical healing, for mental healing. So interesting.
Yeah.
And I think as far as coming of age stories, that transition from from teenager to adult is definitely one where I know in my life I felt so lost.
Yeah.
I think just any books on, that reflect similar experiences or show that, this person has gone through something similar can be very healing and very
Yeah.
empowering.
Yeah, yeah, I totally agree. Yeah, the sense of having to find yourself in the world, is at that age. I think sometimes there's this idea of like, once you're an adult, quote unquote, or you're in college, that you have kind of whatever created a new spot for yourself in the world, and I think sometimes it really just feels like you are kind of more tetherless than ever, and can be really challenging.
Absolutely, I agree. I know that a few of our peers also, I think when I took the YA class with
Yeah.
you, I was also working on a young adult
Yeah.
YA and IPANA also. So that's cool. I think it's a hard time. It's definitely like, yeah, one of those life stages where you're finding yourself and your place in the world, and I think it lasts a little bit longer than maybe.
Totally.
Yeah, and there's a lot of expectations and self-discovery, and so I think it's fantastic. I will say with the Queen of Swords as the outcome,
Yeah.
Sequoia, I'm trying not to do prediction-based tarot.
Yeah.
I do think you'll get it published.
Thank you.
Yeah, like with the Hierophant in the others position, that refers to several things. The M.F.A program. It also refers to you as a lecturer at SDSU. The Queen of Swords as the outcome is your polished manuscript. You'll notice that you started off with the Knight of Swords, which was you, your ambitious self, your let's get it done. I need to say this. I have all this
Yeah.
to say. And the outcome of is the Queen of Swords. So it shows like just essentially a polished novel, but it's one where there's a blend of emotions and intellect and life experience with the strength in the hidden. I do think it'll be helpful for a lot of people, and it'll resonate for a lot of people. It's almost like, sometimes it reminds me, sometimes our own worst enemy is ourselves. So I don't know if your story has any of that in it, but it does.
It does, yeah.
So, and then, okay, so interesting. Are
Well,
you,
but I also feel like it's me with this
I do
piece
think so
too.
too.
Yeah,
Yeah.
where it's I am often been the one where I'm like, this isn't working, or I need to do something like this, and then I'll step back and at some point and be like, what was I thinking? It's like either like A, it's fine, or B, I've like ridiculously overcomplicated this for no reason. And so no, I think it's definitely in a lot of ways me in with this
Yes.
piece. And I don't know why. It's like I think I know the story that I want to tell, and I've known the story I want to tell, and I think I've just often created like very elaborate like mazes for myself then with the writing of this story, and I find myself like lost in them and unable to kind of like walk back out. And I don't know why, but it's that's why I say it was supposed to be so simple, this story, and it has just gotten weirder and weirder for me as I've written it. Sometimes in good ways and sometimes in bad ways.
So let's go back, and I can pull
Yeah.
your card so we can actually look at the obstacle.
Yeah.
The Hermit as the obstacle is, I mean, that's deep thinking. That I
Yeah.
want to pull another. Let's pull another card with it, to see what the obstacle is. Let me go back. Chepso. Okay, so think about your obstacle for a second, or just that it's there. Knight of Cups for your obstacle. Let me go back to where you are. Well, the Knight of Cups is, I mean, it's interesting as that as an obstacle with the Hermit. It can, I mean, there are several things. One, I mean, there's a lot of emotional vulnerability with the Knight
Yeah.
of Cups. And with the Hermit, I mean, I don't know if you've already done I think you have, but it talks about the introspection and going within in a very deep
Yeah.
level. And the Knight of Cups can be the emotional avail- availability, the offering. And I wonder if part of the obstacle for you finishing is maybe just simply, I was reading an article where it talked about, and because I have this issue, and I don't mean to project, so maybe
Oh no, yeah.
this might not be you, but my thoughts are going here, so I'm gonna let them go for a second. It talks about I've always struggled with finishing stories, and it talks about how it requires like a certain layer of emotional vulnerability because of how it'll be perceived in the world and kind of
Yeah.
putting your work out there. The Knight of Cups is, it's like a, it's somebody, traditionally it's more like romantic, courting, it's somebody who's very like, here I am, come look at me, I'm offering this, so it's very, and I almost feel like like you want to keep almost like it's yours, like it's you, and like there's a sense of like not quite being ready to put it out there yet.
Yeah, yeah, that's so interesting, and I think, I mean, one of the things that's really resonating with me with what you're saying with this is like And something I've thought about with this piece is that when I started it, this like 70K start in 2022 that's like doomed me forever to work with. I was like, okay, I'm gonna like draw on like stuff that's happened to me and like my family dynamics and like different things. Like I was like, I'm gonna, with the hubris of the youth, right? You're just like, I'm gonna sprinkle that in there, and so I did, and then I think. My reaction to that in the years since that I've worked on this story is like, I don't know if I'm far enough away from those things yet. You know what I mean? To like actually accurately fictionally represent them in different ways. And then, I mean, crazy stuff has happened with this story where it like, I kind of was writing stuff and then it almost like kind of came true in my family in different ways, in traumatic ways. And so I think it was like, again, there's been, and I think I can overcome it and still handle it well, but it's always going to be something I'm going to think about with this story, and I know, and it's perhaps definitely one of those kind of like big, invisible obstacles inside is like, yeah, I don't think I've quite got enough distance from these things to write about them in the way that I have, and so probably there will be a version of me in like 15, 20 years who will be able to write about these things much, much better, and I probably still will be, and I might look back on, what will hopefully be a published novel at that point and be like, that was my first attempt at like exploring and writing about this on the page and representing this on the page. But I do, I mean, and certainly just in general, yeah, like the ending something is, now it's out in the world and you have to let it be others, and that's challenging. But definitely for me, what's pinging is that I have, certainly throughout all of this been like, yeah, well, what was I thinking that I could just like kind of drop this, you know what I mean? And then be like, it's part of the story now, and just kind of and feedback I've continually gotten is like, oh, I think that this dynamic, can be pushed more, and I'm not sure how you're trying to represent this, and in my head I'm like, I feel like it's just there, because I've just kind of like dropped it, and again, and so maybe like that the courage to really like push into those things and try and represent them truer. Is something that I'm hoping to do with this, but I genuinely think that it's like, it will not be until I am like an older, wiser, kind of deeper and maybe in different ways more healed person, accurately represent those things. And it's funny because I can't remember what setting I was in for this, but it was some kind of author Q&A. It might have even been in our program just very early on, so I don't have as clear of a memory of it. But somebody had asked an author, like, how long does it take for you to kind of write about things that have happened to you? And they were like, a long time. and at the time I didn't really think much of it. And now I'm like, yeah, it makes sense that, you kind of sometimes need like the space to really understand and kind of, fully explore kind of these different things before you put them on the page, whether you're writing in like whatever kind of creative nonfiction, memoir style, or whether you are just trying to kind of, explore those things fictionally. Yeah, so that's what's pinging with me for sure when I'm hearing you speak.
That makes sense with the hermit up there. It's like,
Yeah.
you want a more mature perspective, especially if it's so close to you. But I do wonder, because nonfic there, and actually there was the High Desert Lo-Fi Festival
Yeah,
of
that's
Joshua Tree, and there were some nonfiction writers, authors, who were talking about when do you write it?
yeah,
They're like, don't write it when you're in the middle of it.
totally.
Um,
Yes.
yes, exactly. Um, but I wonder, so the Five of Swords can talk about that
Okay.
perspective and that getting that right angle. And I want to say, this card would encourage you to get it out sooner than later.
Okay.
So, and I wonder what what do you feel? Is it kind of your worry or concern about not being true to the characters or to the perspective? Like what is it exactly
That's a
that
great question. I think for me it's like, I want to represent it in a way that at least feels like accurate and true and meaningful for the characters on the page. And I think what I've maybe been doing is just kind of like, again, light touching it and then kind of like, hoping that it comes across. And so I think, what I might just need to do. Yeah, and I mean, maybe it was really a matter of thinking about it more so in that kind of mode of like a character and a perspective and kind of what I want a reader to connect with that character, and kind of thinking about it in that way, as maybe that's been something I've been like too zoomed out on, in different, as you get lost in this mire of like, oh, am I, accurately whatever, or, can I say these things, can I talk about these things, that kind of stuff. Yeah, but that's really interesting to think about, like, where exactly am I feeling that disconnect, and because I don't know if you ever experienced this, but I think it's one of those instances where it's like your character and you know what you want to say, so you just don't say it because you're like, I think it's there somewhere, and then you just kind of move on, and then you have other readers that are like, I've got no idea like where you think this is coming from, and you're like, I don't know, it's right there. Aren't you in my head with me, like experiencing this? And so I think that exactly. And so I think that's for me, like, I just need to understand how to bring it onto the page. And maybe a big part of that is just, obviously it's like, it's, as all things we write, right, it's coming from our hearts in different ways, but to kind of put some distance between myself and those experiences, and just think more of like, the character, and more about kind of their relationship with the reader in different ways.
Absolutely. I think you'll do it. You'll get there.
It's good to hear. It's good to hear that you're like, get this thing out, because that's like how I feel. I'm like, I always feel with this story, and I'm just telling my husband that it's like my least favorite thing right now, this story, because it's like every time I'm like, and I tell him, he's witnessed this cycle. Every time I tell him, I'm like, this is done. Like, I'm done with this. I've got maybe one more thing and I'm done. The next day, I'm like, actually, it's going to be a 20,000 word rewrite immediately. So it's just like always this kind of like, I'm done, and then I'm like, completely not. And so again, I'm in this place where I'm like, I think I'm getting kind of close, but I really just need to like, do that work with it still.
Yeah, the Five of Swords talks about like maybe also the mental battle. So
Yeah.
it's just you, and
Yeah.
you'll get through it. Like
Yeah.
you'll finish it. I think you'll finish it. You'll finish it this year.
Okay. Yeah, I think, what was I thinking originally? At the beginning of this year, I was like, maybe I'll finish it by this summer. I don't know if that's accurate anymore, but this year then can still be my stretch goal.
Just write your ending.
Yeah,
And
just
that
need to
way
get that
it'll push
ending.
you a little bit.
Yeah, yeah.
So I know that you also write for Substack, and I love your
Yeah.
writing on Substack.
Thank you.
It's very one. It has strong voice. It has your voice. It has fun topics that are also very serious, very meaningful, and so I just kind of wanted to bring that up
Yeah.
because there is a lot of online writing, and
Yeah.
traditionally, and something you mentioned when you said earlier in one of your answers, you mentioned how if the world crumbles tomorrow, why are you creating the art that you're creating?
Yeah.
So I want to ask you, how do you think um, storytelling and writing and publishing might change in the future? And then what do you think the online role, the role of online writing will have in the future of storytelling?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think something with like Substack and that kind of like, writing, at least for me, it's like the only reader that I'm thinking of is myself, and that's what makes that writing fun, is like, I'm not having to think like, is anybody else going to think this is funny? Is anybody else going to understand my references? Is anybody else going to care that Stephanie Meyer is blonde now? It's like I don't let myself like think about any of that. It's like no audience. It's just for me. And then I still put it out there, because I think there's something that makes writing kind of more, I don't know, feel more like real, if you are like kind of like saying that it's like published, and you're like putting it out there, and you're like, this, if you want to read this, you can read this, it's out there. There's like a billion things in my notes app that I'm not doing that with, you know what I mean? But the things on my Substack are that kind of like, this is just for me, and I loved writing it, and like, if you want to read it, you can. And I think that, I mean, I really do like, and I talk about this a lot with my students, because I teach just like composition, and usually my students in composition, like they don't necessarily love writing, and I'm like, yeah, fair. Not everybody wants to write like essays, like academic essays. It's like, yeah, that's not everybody's like favorite cup of tea. And so something I do try and just encourage in that class is like writing can be fun, and it is like, it doesn't matter who else is reading it or like what, it's just like let yourself write, and kind of let yourself, enjoy that. And I think that that's good, because I think capitalism has like just makes us feel like we have to monetize everything that we do, and so things only have value if like we're able to monetize them. And it's so hard to get out of that mindset. I still have that mindset. I'm not saying like, oh, I've ascended or anything like that. It's like we just are kind of in that structure. So I think, something like, just kind of choosing to like write for yourself in that way can be really a nice way of just being like, writing is this like beautiful exploratory like conversation with yourself and the world and art that you love and everything, and that's great. The publishing industry in general, I mean, I don't know, it's hard to I feel like optimistic about things right now, at least for me, with just like AI writing and how gnarly our world is in the moment. And I mean, I really do fundamentally believe that like human beings need, art and truth and beauty, and that we seek it out, and it's, we turn to it in times of crisis, obviously. But I feel like we might be entering a period of time right now where we all forget that, or where lots of people forget that, and then, everybody's watching AI fruit Love Island instead of reading books, and then, but I do think we'll come around again eventually, but I was talking to a group of students a little while ago, and I was like, my most pessimistic projection is that we're gonna like return to an era of like 4 people in a community who know how to read, and they're like in their little like monk tower with all the books, and everybody else is watching like Fruit Love Island, and water rationing, and there will just be like the monk class of readers, up there with, and I'll be up there with like Twilight. See, like the sacred texts. But that's pretty much me just being intensely pessimistic about things. But if I were to say what's a realistic but pessimistic projection, that would probably be, if I were to amp that up all the way, that would be mine.
Well, you know what that reminds me of? I just learned, and I don't have any little ones or anything, and I think this is true. You'll have to correct me here.
Yeah.
I'm a teacher. That they are not teaching phonetic reading anymore, that they're teaching sight word reading.
Yeah, and it's funny. I teach students who want to become K through 12 educators, and I mean, they definitely, it's like a concern of theirs are these kinds of issues with literacy and learning how to read, and when they speak to me, like they are having struggles with those things, and so yeah, I mean, we in America 100% are in a literacy education crisis, and I see it probably getting a lot worse before it gets better right now, especially with the different ways that like AI is being implemented into classrooms. So again, I think that there's a way out of that for us all, but I do think that it's I don't think we've seen the worst of it yet necessarily.
Yeah, definitely, because it's kind of just starting right now, so it hasn't
Yeah.
fully unraveled. So the
Yeah.
implications of it won't be seen for what, 10, at least 10, 20, a while.
Yeah, totally. Yeah.
Um, Something else that you reminded me of, what was it? Oh, do you think that, what is the old saying where it's like your writing isn't really writing until somebody has read it?
Yeah. I have, yeah.
I think that's true.
I don't think so, I mean, I think I can understand it, you know what I mean, and I understand that feeling for sure. And then, like I was saying, there's just that little specialness of like putting something out into the world and knowing that it can like connect with other people. Because I think, I mean, fundamentally, a lot of the times what we are trying to do with writing is connect with somebody, right? Or like we're hoping to connect with somebody, and so that is a big part of it. But I mean, I also, I do tell my students this too. I'm like, writing is so intensely personal, and it should be intensely personal. And if you know, it can just be a conversation with yourself, or a kind of a conversation with, you know, something that then nobody else ever has to kind of like read or look at. And then I think that is, you know, it's still an important expression in different ways. And I mean, I got my start writing in like fan fiction spaces when I was young, and you know, so I was like 12, 13, and so the internet was a lot younger and a lot different, and a lot more scattered. You know, I think now eyes tend to get drawn to fan fiction more just because we're so centralized on the internet now. There's like 3 things to do that don't suck, and then so everybody's like, you know, and so you know, nobody even really knew that word when I was a child. It was like, you know, it was like a secret thing that I did, and now, you know, like Harry Potter fan fictions are getting like $1 million book contracts and stuff, you know what I mean? And so it's changed a lot, but back in my day, when the internet was still fun and cool, and whatnot, it was like you would like post. I mean, I would write like fan fiction and post it, and not a soul in the world would look at it. You know, but it would be published. It would be on the internet, but it would, you know, quite literally just be me, you know, in my whatever fanfic.net profile, and that was beautiful, and also a part of fan fiction that was beautiful back in the day before it's, you know, also getting ruined now, is like it was completely outside of monetary structures at all, you know what I mean? And so it's like, you know, you are writing 600,000 word Mario and Luigi fanfic, and you are doing it purely for the love of the game. You know, you are not making a dollar off of that. And like, you know, that for me, it was like this, the most purest, beautiful, like way of learning how to love writing, was like, you just did it because you loved it. And maybe other people loved it too. And that was also awesome. And then you got to connect with people in that way. But, you know, often it was just you. And it was still like, you know, a great, robust kind of expression of creativity, and I do miss that, and I feel like I miss those spaces probably for younger writers now as well. And you know, I obviously, you know, my son's very young still, so I don't have to like think about like what's out there for teens right now or anything. But I remember when I was a young writer, there were a lot of these like great like teen writer spaces on the internet and whatnot, like websites specifically for teen writers that were like run by educators, run by like nonprofit educational things. I still get emails from like a Teen Inc. like writing website that I signed up for probably when I was like 12 or 13. I still get emails from them to this day that's like, here's what teen writers are doing right now. But anyway, I think that those spaces were also so great because, again, that was like, you know, really you weren't producing anything, you know, within like structures of whatever readership, or even structures of, you know, certainly not money, but that, you know, those kind of spaces of encouragement existed were also really cool and wonderful for me when I was a young writer. And so I'm sure that places like those do exist right now, and I'm just too lazy to find them from, you know, in different ways. But you know, those I think are so important too, especially if you are just kind of beginning as a writer when you're younger, and you're kind of looking for like, you know, what does it mean to like craft my work and share it or not share it. Those kind of spaces meant a lot to me then.
What kind of fan fiction did you write?
Oh, it's a great question. I cut my teeth with Kingdom Hearts fan fiction, which is a video game series. It's one of my most precious things to me in the world. It was just a 24-year anniversary of it being released, I think, yesterday. And so we used to go on the Nickelodeon.com. They used to have message boards. I mean, the internet used to be just a beautiful free-for-all. And they had message boards for everything. And like, you know, and so I would go to the video game message board, and on that message board, people were publishing like fan fiction, and it was like the weirdest like it's like you would do a post and then a reply and then a reply and then a reply, and everything was heavily moderated. So everything you posted, some moderator out there whose job was moderating 12-year-olds on the Nick message boards was reading it, and so they were reading my whatever, I don't even know, 1,000 chapter Kingdom Hearts fan fiction that I was writing. And so I was like 12 doing that. I was very young. And then after that, I kind of snowballed out into basically anything that I read that I loved. I was like, I'm going to write a fan fiction for this now. And so it would be like Twilight, that kind of stuff. And then as I kind of moved into adolescence, I did a lot of like Harry Potter, Lord of the Rings, and those were, I mean, beautiful spaces. People produce like just gorgeous work, gorgeous work in those spaces. But yeah, that was my start. The Nick.com message boards.
So cute. I do remember those. It's so,
Yeah,
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 so different.
I
And I know
know,
that fan fiction is still very alive. There's a few in our MFA
100%.
group who
Yeah,
write some fan fiction. So I
yeah,
know Facebook also has some
yeah,
groups.
yeah.
But it reminds me, so what are your practices now
Mm,
that you do just for the love of writing? Do you have
mm.
any, like journaling? You mentioned journaling.
That's a great question. I've always wanted to be a journaler, and I don't have the attention span for it. And so as a kid, I was always like buying a journal, and then I'd write like one entry, and then I'd never do it again, you know. My younger sister, she's 14, and she is the most meticulous journaler ever. She has like shelves of her own journals that she has filled on a daily basis. It's incredible to see. It's like I'm like, I understand journaling now when I see her do it. But no, and for me, the Substack was really an attempt to like practice and just like engage with writing a little bit more outside of either work or whatever, like, you know, manuscripts and whatnot. And so that's been really fun to just do kind of little silly things like that again. I mean, not always silly, but just in the sense of like, yeah, I want to write about, whatever, this picture book, and I just am gonna kind of like jot some thoughts out about it. And so that's been a nice way of just like writing, something else, something different, and kind of something outside of whatever different projects that I'm working on. And then, I mean, otherwise it's hard, I think, with my baby. He's 19 months old now, and I think it's probably going to be another year or two before I am ever able to have like a writing schedule or anything like that again, a writing kind of routine. And in a way that's good too, because it encourages me right now to kind of like find those little like moments of whatever writing, in that, beforehand, before having a baby, I was like, it needs to be the right temperature, and I need to have my music, and I need to be really like feeling it, and I need to be in the dark and do this. And now it's like, oh, I've got like 5 seconds, I'm gonna la 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 la. And so I think that's a good exercise too, to just kind of push past that mentality of like, I've got to be in the zone, you know what I mean? And then instead just like get stuff out and then get in the zone later some other time.
Totally. I mean, because you're not just a mother to a baby, a brand new baby. You're also a professional, an
Yeah.
academic. So you're pretty busy. I know
Yeah.
that you mentioned your writing practices. You mentioned reading a little bit every day
Hmm.
and writing every second you get. What is your advice for somebody who might be also a new mother who is a professional trying to get their story out? What are some of the challenges that you faced, and what is it you would advise or encourage?
It's a great question. I mean, the biggest thing I think is like lower your expectations for yourself, and don't feel bad and don't put pressure on yourself. I remember before I had my baby, I can't remember, it was a pretty popular author, I think, and I wish I could remember who it was, and I'm sorry, but she was saying like, oh, I wrote this book on my phone at night when my baby was breastfeeding, and I was like, I'm gonna have so much writing time when my baby's born, and I'll be up all night breastfeeding, breastfeeding and I'll write my novel. I props to whoever that author was, because for me that shit was impossible. I mean, I was up just like, praying to God to like live to the next minute of my life. You are just so tired, and breastfeeding just zaps your life energy. And so, and then of course in retrospect it's like, yeah, what did I think was going to happen? And then so like not having those kinds of expectations. If you can do that, like more power to you, but like lower your expectations for yourself, lower your, like just, it's going to be okay. I just saw this tweet and I was telling my husband about it. I loved it. This woman was like, it was years ago, the original tweet, and she was like, oh my God, you guys, like, do you have any tips about like writing with a new baby? I'm just like really struggling to like find time. So then years later, now she retweeted that and she's like, hey, if any of you guys were reading through any of those bullshit advice that people were giving me, she was like, just know the only solution is to wait 2 or 3 more years. And I think that's great advice. It's like, if you can get anything done in that first like year or so, like wonderful, do what you got to do. Obviously, I mean, I finished my M.F.A. program, somehow. So it's like, sometimes you got to do what you got to do, but like, don't think that you are going to immediately enter into some kind of like, glorious writing creation routine. I didn't write a word when I was pregnant either. It was like 9 months of me sitting on my couch watching TV and knitting when I wasn't at work, and doing absolutely nothing. I mean, I didn't even bend over to pick things off the ground. My husband was like, if anything that happened below me, my husband was just doing for me. So probably I had the time and space to write, but just like mentally I couldn't go there, when I was pregnant. And so again, it's just like, let yourself kind of feel those things, do those things, and know that you will get back to it eventually. And then also find like I was not writing my novel when I was up at the night breastfeeding, but I have with my baby napping on me and kind of next to me and whatnot breastfeeding. I've really gotten into reading in a much bigger way than I have been able to, kind of because when I'm working I'm just like reading what I'm teaching, and so it's like outside of that I really don't read a lot, or I wasn't reading a lot. And so now having those kind of hours with my baby, and I'm like, I really, you can only watch so much TikTok. I really have gotten into reading on my phone. And so I've got like, I borrow books from my library on my phone. And so I've gone from probably reading maybe like 1 or 2 for pleasure novels a year to like, I mean, it's not even going to be an impressive number because it's still not that many, but for me, it's like doubled, tripled the amount that I'm doing now. And so that's been a great kind of alternative way of me supporting my craft, is like, okay, I'm not getting as many words on the page now, but now I've carved out this space where I'm actually like reading much more kind of widely and kind of exploratory ways than I was before I had to lay down for 2 hours every day with a baby. And so yeah, look for those kind of alternate ways of supporting your craft. It's not always going to be what you think it's going to be, and that's okay.
Absolutely. I think it's important just to, I mean, obviously aspire and dream big, but be
Yeah,
realistic. Give
totally.
yourself some grace, especially if you just had a baby.
Yeah.
Okay, so what I'm
Okay.
thinking is we do have a tradition on Ready Marginalia where I'd like to ask in your, let's say they're the manuscript of your life, what would that Marginalia say?
Wow, that's such a beautiful question. And I'm thinking right now how I annotate, and I'm trying to kind of translate that into my own kind of life. And I think something that I like to do when I'm kind of being like a smartass and I'm annotating is I'll just do like LOL question mark next to something, as a reminder to myself of like, what's going on here? And I think that might maybe there's the first thing that's coming to mind, and I don't know if that sounds too glib or self-effacing, but just for me, that's something that I will do a lot in my own kind of annotating practice, is LOL question mark. As a kind of like, think about this more, what's going on here, I'm not sure what's happening. And so I'd say that probably would pop up for me a few times.
I love it. I think don't take it too seriously sometimes.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah, and definitely
yeah,
think about it more. And
yeah,
I love it. And have fun with it. Laugh.
yeah,
Yeah, yeah.
totally.
Awesome. Well, Sequoia, thank you so much for conversating with us today.
Thank
I
you.
really enjoyed it, and I think you provided such great insight. And I love your creative journey. I hope to see your book out there on the
Thank
shelf
you.
soon.
Thank you. This is wonderful, and you are a beautiful tarot reader. I'm so impressed. I'll be thinking about this for a while.
Oh, thank you, thank you. And so, for anyone watching who would like to follow you or check out your writing or learn more about you, where should they go?
My Substack, which is called Sequoia Substack, because I don't have a better name for it, and I think is also I've got like the nitty gritty linked here with you if you want to just like see my username, which is just also like Sequoia with a bunch of random numbers, and so obviously got to work on my branding, but yeah, that's where I'm doing anything right now that's readable. It's gonna happen right there.
Totally. And we'll definitely provide details for that in the description box. And it's a fantastic Substack.
Thank you.
I really enjoy reading it. Like genuinely, I'm like, oh, this is good.
Thank you.
All right, Sequoia. Well, thank you so much. I
Thank
appreciate
you.
you.
Thanks. You too.
Bye-bye. So that's a wrap. Thank you so much for joining us today. Please leave a comment, like, and subscribe. Our next guest features a conversation with author and poet Valita Hicks. See you next time. Bye-bye.